the Fire Bernstein. It is quite a day, lot to talk about. I just got off of Louder with Crowder.
How'd it go?
So that was fun. It was fun. It was well, I don't know. I'll be interested to see the feedback that people have. I think it started, I think, kind of contentious, but ultimately I don't know. The debate portion was essentially came down to him saying, you called for Trump to be impeached, and you agree with Obama more than Trump when it comes to Iran and stuff like that. And then, I think once we actually got into it, there wasn't much of a substantive debate. But then we went onto like the Mug Club, which is like the subscriber thing, and we just talked a bit. It wasn't like that part wasn't really a debate. It was just more of like a conversation. But anyway, I appreciate Crowder and the guys for having me on. I hope you guys go check it out and enjoy it. And how are you, Rob? What's new?
I need to spend some time at home and clean up this studio. I am tangled in cords right now. I tried swapping microphones. I got a fancy one like yours. Whatever. Improvements coming soon.
All right, well, there you go.
Yeah, I keep going on the road and like unplugging stuff. It's a whatever. It's a train wreck in here. But anyways, we're coming to the end of Porch Tour, so come out, buy tickets.
Ooh, what do you got? What's coming up?
Oh man, the 2 wild runs left. Bridgeport, Connecticut, tomorrow night, Thursday night in New York City at Pubkey, which is a Bitcoin bar. Fans will like that.
I love Pubkey. Great spot.
Oh yeah, I used to, at the previous bar, I used to drink there all the time. It was actually called formerly Crow Bar. Whatever, we don't have to get into that. Walpole, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, big old mansion basement party, and then Providence, Rhode Island, and then next week, Jacksonville, Savannah, and Charleston, and then New Orleans, then Skankfest, and then winding down.
There you go. And of course, me and Rob only have one gig left for the year, which is Poughkeepsie, New York in November. ComicDaveSmith.com for those ticket links. And they will sell out. We got 2 shows there. They're both going to sell out. So go grab tickets for those if you would like to come out. And we got BK Chris Faga also on the show with us. So it should be a good time.
Yeah, we did. We did almost no New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut shows this year. So those are going to be filled up.
That's why these tickets are moving. Also, reminder to everybody to please, and thank you so much to the people who already have. It really means so much to us. But my wife's children's book, Healthy Hibernation, is available for pre-sale on Amazon and bookbaby.com. She was up on a few of the charts on Amazon. She was number one in children's health and was like in the top 20 on new release children's books. So that's just like really warms my heart. It means a lot to her. I really appreciate everybody who picks up a copy. And I promise you, it's like the sweetest book. If you got little kids or someone who you love has little kids, you'll really enjoy it. So yeah, make sure to go grab that. All right, let's get into some stuff today. So last night, now full disclosure, I knew this was happening, but did not know it was happening last night. But Tucker Carlson, whose producer is actually just texting me, Tucker Carlson hosted Nick Fuentes on his show last night. It was a huge show. I mean, I don't know what the numbers on it are as of right now, but this thing is going to do unreal numbers. And it was, I don't know, it was, first of all, it was a very interesting show. I watched the whole thing. I really enjoyed it. I thought both of them did a really good job. It was a very interesting dynamic to me where just both, from my assessment of it, I think both Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson they're very, very good at what they do. They're both 2 kind of like elite level guys in this game, whatever exactly this game is. And there was just an interesting thing there. There was like a respect dynamic between the 2 of them. There was a little, like, there was kind of this tension, and it was interesting to see them kind of work it out together. And I overall really enjoyed the spirit of the thing. But so I'm watching it, and it's kind of interesting. But then, of course, part of it is that you go, yo, people are going to lose their minds about this. Like, it's just one of those things where you're like, I mean, there is, Nick Fuentes, of course, as you know, Rob, has, kind of occupied this space of being the toxic boogeyman right-wing figure. I talked about this years ago, 5-6 years ago, when I first had him on the show. I just never gotten so many people were demanding that I denounce Nick Fuentes, and were it's like, how dare you platform him and all of this. And obviously, like, in the 5 years or 6 years since then, the world's changed quite a bit. And we're just there's a different dynamic now. And so now Fuentes is bigger than ever. The censorship regime is weaker than ever. The leftists who are hysterical are more dismissed than ever. And now Nick's been doing a lot of these big shows. He did, obviously, Glenn Greenwald's show, Patrick Bet-David's show, Russell Brand's show. Me and him did our show. Maybe not quite as big as those, but it was a pretty big show when he was on it. But there's something about Tucker Carlson that it's just different. And you knew this was going to drive them all crazy, because it is a different thing to have the number one right-wing guy in America have him on his show. And so you just knew they were going to flip out about that. I don't know, Rob. I'll just say this. There is this, the right wing was always gate kept. And it was almost always gate kept by neoconservatives. And they would keep out what they call bigots out. But really, that always meant anti-war people. Like anybody who wasn't for the warfare state always got kicked out. And so, in fact, I'd encourage any of you to go read. There was a piece in National Review by David Frum. You guys remember the foreign spy who works for Israel? David Frum? This is the guy who came up with the axis of evil, the speechwriter for George W. Bush. Well, he wrote a piece in National Review it was either 2002 or 2003 called Unpatriotic Americans. And it was the whole piece was about all of our favorite guys, Rob. The whole piece was about Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul and Lou Rockwell and Justin Raimondo, and how all of these guys, these were right-wingers who hated America. They were truly unpatriotic. And why was that, Rob? Because they wouldn't get on board with the war. That's what made them so bad. That's how much they hate America. They side with the terrorists because they don't support us invading Iraq. And so I guess in like a larger sense, like the bigger symbol, the thing that I love about it is that you see all the neocons now freaking out. And it's like, yeah, fuck you. You don't control the conversation anymore. And even if that means, that fucking Nick Fuentes gets the thing and whatever, I don't care. Fucking you guys don't get to control the conversation anymore. And you know what? Nick Fuentes makes a lot of really good points. Okay, there's some things that we disagree on, but you know what? He makes some really good points on the other stuff. And I actually thought it was very interesting. Tucker got really into his story. And then I was kind of interesting to see Tucker go, oh yeah, that's what they do to people who criticize Israel. They try to ruin you. And look, they ended up making you an actual Jew hater or something like that. And then they end up talking that through. And Nick was kind of similar to the way he was on my podcast, where he's just like, no, I'm not. He's like, no, I'm not saying it's all Jews, and I'm not preaching racial hatred, and that's not what I'm saying. And so if nothing else, you get this guy on record saying that, people get to hear both sides of it. I just always thought, and I think you agree with me, but I'll turn it over to you here, Rob. But it was always so, if you want any type of positive outcome, the last thing you ever want to do is heighten up tensions and heighten up censorship and get everybody crazy. What you want to do is have a release valve. Hey, let's have a conversation about this. That's the path forward. Let's talk about these things. And it seems to me that the only people who freak out about platforming, much like the woke left used to do, now it's the ones calling others woke right, but it's the Zionist right doing it. The only reason why people ever want to suppress speech and to silence conversations is because they go, we'll lose if you can hear from the other side. Because everybody will probably agree that we're the ones who are wrong here and need to be left behind. And that's why you want to shut down conversation. No other reason. But anyway, you go ahead, Rob. Any thoughts you have?
I always think it's fun when people are panicked about platforming. And I guess it's fun when internet people are able to overcome all of that and have a big audience and, climb their way onto the big platform. So haven't watched it yet. It'll definitely be on my weekend of travel activity. I did check out the Martyr Maid you recommended, and that was a really incredible listen on World War I. But I'll have to reserve my comments till I actually listen to the episode.
Yep, you did. You liked that World War I?
Oh, it was great.
Series.
Yeah,
it's
fantastic.
Great. Yeah, it's really, whoo, does he put you there? You know, the thing about I think I might have said this on the show before, but the thing about Daryl Cooper is I'm such a fan of his. Like I've listened to like almost not the entire thing, but I've listened to a lot of his long form series that he's put together. But every time I get ready to listen to one or like a new one comes out, I always like I get excited because I'm like a nerd for this stuff. I love a good history podcast, you know? And so I should say I don't actually listen to a lot of history. He's really the only one. But I like reading about history, and I like the way he tells stories. I never really got into like Dan Carlin or some of those other guys. But so I get like excited. It's almost like, oh, the movie you've been waiting to see is out today. Like, oh yeah, I get to go see this. And then I'm like, oh yeah, let's turn this on. Let's listen to this for a little bit. And then like 10 minutes in, Daryl's like dragged you into the deepest waters of how dark humanity can be. And you're like, oh yeah. And that happens to me every time. And then I'm just like, oh no, I wasn't prepared for any of this. I'm feeling things.
And World War I Hitler was a badass.
World War I Hitler was a fucking badass. And you kind of, it is, you realize like you really can't tell the story of the whole goddamn thing without starting with that it was just like this kid who was, you know, lived in a very tough time compared to today, was in search of like an identity and found it in a way that he had never found it before, being a part of a war.
That was one of my takeaways, was just the stupidity of putting your identity into the state or the kingdom in which you live.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean? Just hearing about all these people that were so passionate about defending the king of Germany or whatever his title was, and it's like, buddy, live your own life.
Well, it is something, and well, you also see how many people throughout history have, you know, been. Well, it's an amazing thing to think about, especially when you talk about like the World War I meat grinder, like, and especially coming, you know, from a society like the United States of America, where we're so rich and so comfortable compared to all of human history, and we're so individualistic compared to all of human history. That's like the idea that you would ever like gladly jump into a meat grinder on behalf of this abstraction, which is like the king or the empire or the regime. And you go, I'll give up my life gladly to maybe advance the interests of this other dude who will not lose one wink of sleep over me being dead. Like my mother will be crying for the rest of the year, but it's just a very bizarre thing. It's very hard for us to understand, but it's important to try because a lot of people did that throughout human history. So anyway, there's the reaction to Nick Fuentes on Twitter has really been something. And one of the things I found interesting is that now there is this huge, so there's this big push. I don't know exactly what to cancel Tucker Carlson. I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but so
Fox again.
Well, so Dinesh D'Souza, who I reached out to today and invited him on the show, because Dinesh out of this whole group of, you know, what you could call like the old guard, pro-Israel right-wingers, like maybe not a neocon himself, but certainly neocon adjacent, and was a neocon at one point, and then I guess says he broke away from them. But of that whole group of people, right? Like I don't know, like, you know, I mean, Dave Rubin said he would debate me, but then a bunch of people tried to reach out and set it up, and he won't do it. And I don't even really want to, because he's so dumb and it's just too easy. Like, what's the point? I just wanted to flex and let the world know that he was too scared to do it. But like Dave Rubin's a dumb, insane person. Laura Loomer, I debated. She's the dumbest person on the internet. Mark Levin's never going to do it. Ben Shapiro's never going to do it, right? I mean, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dinesh seemed like the one guy who, like, maybe he would actually have the conversation. And on some level, I almost feel like, I bet I could convince you. like I don't know, with Dinesh, you almost feel like I'd be like, dude, if we talked, I think I could convince you. Like, what's up with this? But so he decided to release some text messages from Charlie Kirk. And I just thought this was interesting because, look, obviously, after Charlie Kirk was, you know, horrifically assassinated, there was a lot of talk about all of this stuff, including on our show. And I was one of the people who released some text messages. But at least to me, it was a little bit of a different thing. You know, there was an environment where Netanyahu and Bill Ackman and Josh Hammer and then on the other side, Candace Owens and all these people were kind of like releasing the information that they had. And there was this big conversation about what was Charlie Kirk's state of mind before he died. And like, I had a little bit of information on that. Now, I didn't have a smoking gun or anything major, but Candace called on me and Tucker to release it. And I went, okay, if everyone's doing this, if we're all releasing text messages and private letters and private communications and all of this, fine, I'll give you what I have just so I'm transparent and it's open. Now, however people feel about that, that's what ended up happening. This is a little bit different. So Dinesh posted today, and this is the tweet. He said, I'm posting 2 text exchanges with Charlie Kirk where he calls Nick Fuentes vermin and insists even my debating him and defeating his arguments nevertheless amplified him. One can only imagine what Charlie would say about Tucker's butt-licking interview with Fuentes, which, like, first of all, it wasn't even that. They did like argue, but Tucker gave him pushback. Tucker pinned him down. Tucker said it's like unchristian to be collectivist in any way, that you can't hate an entire group of people or blame them. Now, Nick conceded that, so there wasn't anything more to argue about. But like, it's not like Tucker didn't, and this is kind of what happened with me and Nick too. Like, I picked some points that I wanted to argue about, but then like he didn't really want to argue, it felt like, and he just didn't really disagree. But even when I brought up the Holocaust, he was like, I don't know. Some people say it didn't happen, but I think it happened. Maybe it's exaggerated. And I was like, yeah, I don't think it's exaggerated. I think that, but that was it. What else am I supposed to say? You know, and like, we talked about hating Jews. We talked about racial prejudice. I don't know. He said reasonable stuff on all of them. Anyway, so he releases this text thread, which, first of all, okay, I'll read it and then we could discuss this. So for the background, Dinesh D'Souza debated Nick Fuentes a couple months before Charlie was killed. So here's the text message from Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk says, this was a massive mistake that you did this. He's vermin and you just gave him one of the biggest boosts of his career. And then the next thing that Charlie wrote was, you have no idea the damage you did by talking to him and complimenting him. You are making him even bigger. We've been fighting this guy for 6 years, and you are the first mainstream voice to debate and give him a compliment, which then makes him bigger and more powerful. And then it doesn't. And then he responds, but he kind of cuts off his own response there. But anyway, so now a bunch of people are, Josh Hammer, who I couldn't help but respond to today, Rob, because it's just too much. Was he
plugging his book?
Well, no, he wasn't in this one. So I guess I really should have given him some credit for that. But he said, he quote tweeted, which by the way is a really stupid way to do it, but he quote tweeted the show. Like, you know how like you put the video on YouTube, I mean on Twitter, like Tucker does. It's got, by the way, 10 million views on Twitter right now. Holy Lord. So he quote tweets that and goes, the great Charlie Kirk is rolling in his grave right now. Simply despicable. And I said, what's despicable is to pretend like you speak for Charlie Kirk. And also what's despicable is lying about him and promoting your book in the immediate aftermath of his death. But I just want to make something clear here, because I find this to be, and I do think there's a major difference. There is a major difference between Candace Owens showing a group chat of Charlie Kirk saying, I'm going to abandon supporting Israel right before his death, or me sharing a text message where he said, hey, I think you did a great job against Douglas Murray. I actually don't really disagree with you on much at all. Like, there was an argument about how Charlie Kirk felt. Okay. And the Israeli government, the prime minister of Israel, is attempting to use how Charlie Kirk felt in this moment of a big national upheaval and quote from the letter that he sent to him, which, by the way, when you look back at it, he just quoted the lines about how Charlie Kirk loves Israel so much. He didn't mention at the time that Charlie Kirk was like, we're getting killed out here. Your Hasbro bullshit is not working. You know, he conveniently omitted that part, but when they're trying to make this case, and then you're like, well, I actually do have some evidence that it's a little bit different than that. His feelings were at least more complicated than that. And then Candace really had evidence of that. That's a little bit different than Dinesh now pointing out how he believes Charlie would have felt about Tucker having someone else on his podcast. Who gives a shit? Like, why does that matter? Why is it relevant to say that he would have disagreed? Like, it's relevant where Charlie Kirk was before he died. If you're claiming this is where he was, then it's relevant to say, no, he wasn't there. He was here. Why is it relevant to go like if I wanted to have someone on the show and you go, Charlie Kirk wouldn't have liked you having him on the show, you'd be like, okay, that's fine. That has nothing to do with my decision. Never booked anyone based off what Charlie Kirk's feelings were before, and I'm not going to do that now. And so now what they're attempting to do is to say, well, look, if Charlie was annoyed when Dinesh debated Nick Fuentes, then he'd really be annoyed about Tucker hosting Nick Fuentes, which, number one, that's already a leap because there's a lot of other factors involved there. Like, also the fact is that Nick has really blown up recently, and it's kind of just undeniable at this point that he's a part of this national conversation. He gets to be here too. There's no arguing that anymore. And so I don't know what Charlie, but that's the thing. I don't know. And neither does Dinesh, and neither does Josh Hammer. We don't know what Charlie would have thought. But so they're trying to use that to now say, obviously Charlie would have hated this, and therefore Tucker shouldn't be allowed at Turning Point events anymore. That's basically the line that they're going down. When the only thing we actually know that Charlie said was like, over my dead body will Tucker Carlson not be allowed at Turning Point events. That's one thing he was crystal clear on through a whole bunch of those messages. Like, and he was publicly very clear about this to Megyn Kelly in that focus group thing that he did with the young people talking about Jew hatred and Israel support and all that. He's over and over again was like, they're coming down on me for platforming Tucker Carlson. I will not budge on that. He will continue to be at Turning Point events. And in fact, he publicly booked him for the event that he just did. Tucker just did an event at Turning Points, which is obviously Charlie after his death. But Charlie had booked him on that beforehand. And so anyway, I don't know. I just find there's something really dirty about trying to speak for a friend of yours who just died. And you're coming out with the opposite conclusion of what you know he said when he was alive, based on guessing how he would have felt about this interview. I just find that to be fucking awful and in really bad taste.
I bet if Kurt Cobain was still alive over COVID, he would have been doing PSAs telling us all to get the vaccine. There's something about when you get taken out early where, I guess you become a what would Jesus do type figure.
Right.
Now everyone's trying to enact him for their agenda. And in this case, it's an agenda for censorship. And he's going, oh, well, you have so much respect for Charlie Kirk. You should know he would have hated you for doing this. But yeah, I agree with you that it's a stupid criticism.
Well, especially, and guys, by the way, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and Natalie, grab any if you see any, because I'm happy to take questions from the listeners on this show. By the way, if you want to be in the live chat, sign up over at partoftheproblem.com. You get the show live, ad free. You get the 4th episode of the week, which is a members only episode. The only way to get it is to sign up at partoftheproblem.com, or I suppose you could steal it. But please don't. Please sign up. Steal it if you're not going to sign up. But yeah, so I'll take questions on that. But I've always thought, particularly to me, like, there's something about, look, obviously there's a difference between, like, hijacking someone's legacy or doing something that you think they might want, they would have liked to be done. Like if I died and then like you raised money to buy like 1,000 copies of Ron Paul Revolution and put them in libraries around the country, you could reasonably be like, I think this is a cool thing that Dave would have appreciated, if we did or something. But like if you tried to argue for like a government policy or something like that, you'd be like, dude, what the fuck? This is everything he was against. And I gotta say, with Charlie Kirk, it did seem like immediately in the aftermath of his death, there were a bunch of people who were trying to be like, oh, look at all these lefties celebrating it. We should have the attorney general crack down on that. And now there's a bunch of people talking about like deplatforming and stuff. And you're like, this was clearly the opposite of what Charlie Kirk was all about. Like if there was one thing that he was all about, it was like being anti-censorship, pro-free speech, pro-conversations. Wasn't that the whole thing? And like, look, I think one of the things that was like a takeaway to me from the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes episode last night was that, you know, you're like, hey, look, we tried this your way. And I don't really mean we, because I was never a part of that. I was having Nick Fuentes on the show 6 years ago. Like I never bought into this platforming censorship bullshit. But like Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, they tried to squash him when he was young. Charlie Kirk said here in his own text message, for 6 years, they've been trying to ice him out. Okay, guys, you had your shot. None of that worked. So now we're going to do it this way. Now we're going to do it the Tucker Carlson and the Dave Smith way, which is this radical idea that we sit down and we talk about it and we hash this shit out. And we talk about the areas where we agree. We talk about the areas where we disagree. That's how we will be doing this moving forward. And for all of you guys who have your like, you know, clutching your pearls over this, too bad. You had your way in the old order. That order failed. And now we are living here. I don't know what to say. It's just, this is just a reality. It's not even like, I don't care how you feel about it, but just watching all these guys flip out. And it's like, hey, you know, you can believe, you know, there was one thing Charlie said, and I hate to ever speak ill of the dead, you know, and like I said, Charlie was a friend. I was very grateful to him for the way he treated me over this last year. And particularly in the face of a lot of, you know, in the face of a serious pressure campaign, he never threw me under the bus, never budged on you know, that he was right to have that debate, right to have Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson there. But there was this one moment I remember, and that happened earlier in the year, where like someone called in and asked if he would ever debate Nick Fuentes. And he was like, no, like I don't debate trolls and I don't debate neo-Nazis or something like that. And he was like, that's too far beyond the pale. And I think that, and this has been a major, major theme of mine for like fucking 15 years or something like that. But it's a little bit crazy for any right-winger to say, Nick Fuentes is a bridge too far because he's racist and sexist and anti-Semitic or something like that. It's like, dude, Charlie Kirk debated Maoists. He debated abortionists. He debated communists. He debated, I mean, I said Maoists, but you know, he debated all types of people. And it's just not so clear to me. Like, and this is something that I think people on the right really have to think about. You know, the Dinesh D'Souza's of the world, or I guess not Dinesh in this case, because Dinesh did debate Nick Fuentes, but the Ben Shapiro's of the world and the Josh Hammers of the world, they are saying, this is the Overton window here. Nick Fuentes is beyond the pale. I would say that the right wing in America has been taking, the right wing in America for my entire lifetime has outsourced the Overton window to the left. We've allowed the left to decide where the Overton window is. Why does that make sense from a right-wing perspective? It simply doesn't. The left would never allow the right wing to dictate to them where the Overton window is, right? We were never able to do that through all the years of it. But I'm just saying, for me, someone who I have a very different worldview than leftists. I have a very different worldview than progressive Democrats. And I will decide for myself where my hierarchy of moral outrages is and where my Overton window is. I suppose we all have a line of someone we just wouldn't talk to because we think they're so terrible. But why is it, right, that let's say a lockdown governor can be debated, can be platformed, you can have a conversation with them? And Charlie Kirk had a conversation with Gavin Newsom. They sat down, had a respectful conversation, some debate, some agreement. You know, nobody is saying you shouldn't platform that person or something like that. You could have someone who was advocating transing 5-year-olds. There's been lots of conversations with people like that. There's lots of conversations with people who support the destruction of Gaza. They just I support killing tens of thousands of children. If that's what it takes to maybe degrade Hamas, then I support that. explain to me, not by your worldview, but by my worldview, why I'm supposed to find those positions more respectable, more acceptable, or something like that. Because it makes no sense to me. And so going forward, I'm just going to make up my mind for myself. I mean, going backward too. I've been doing this the whole time, but now the country's caught up with me, Rob. So now I'm really doing it going forward. So by the way, I will also be happy to have a Maoist and an abortionist on the show. I will be taking recommendations.
You could probably do both those at the same time.
I mean, most Maoists are also, but that is a good point. What someone wrote, what do you think about Nick's final comments about immigration and enforcing it with an iron fist? Just remind me of what the final comment was, because I listened to the thing last night, and I think I was, not because it wasn't a great show, I think I was just fading toward the end, just because it was late and I'm a weak father. But if you remind me what the comments were at the end, I will give you my thoughts on that. So Jonah wrote, Dave, are you what is that? A Wangaf? Do you know what that is, Rob? WANGHAF? Sorry, guys, I'm not cool.
You might have just got him punked right there. Got you to say something.
Probably
you
did.
Supposed to say. Might have just invited a demon into your home. You have no idea.
Get Finkelstein on the show. He's a Maoist. Once upon a time, I think he still does identify as a communist, which is just, come on, Norman. Like, geez, look, he's a he's a real deal expert on the Israel-Palestine history, and he's been really heroic, I think, in that department. And I love Norman Finkelstein. I always love figures that like shatter a paradigm. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about being the Jewiest guy of all time, with the Jewiest name of all time, who's the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, who's totally pro-Palestinian. Like, there's just something about that I was, I'm a Ron Paul guy. I liked the Republican in Texas, who's the most conservative man in the country, who says legalize heroin. Like, there's just something about that I've always found compelling. Not saying that proves you right away, but there's something interesting about guys like that, and I love that. But like, the fact that he still identifies as a communist is goddamn insane. I mean, who the hell? Who could be smart enough to make all of the arguments that he makes on all this other shit? And you haven't just come across an argument debunking communism? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's like it's like you go to like a heart surgeon who's like just saved someone's life with open heart surgery, and you're like, I got a common cold, and he goes, have you tried leeches? And you're like, wait, you do open heart surgery, but you're still on the leeches thing? You haven't. It's just very bizarre that you would figure just through general knowledge you had come across someone going like, oh yeah, there's a whole price calculation problem. It doesn't work at all. Like, it's just, I don't know. I find that very strange. But hey, what can you say? Okay, so here's the follow-up. He was saying that Trump needs to arrest the governor of Illinois and go harder on the ICE protests, and that he wants to use overwhelming force to get rid of it, I guess, to get rid of illegal immigration. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, things like that are very tricky. And I think that there is you always got to be like, those type of moves actually really do require 4D chess, not just the type of 4D chess where everybody claims he's doing it when he's not doing it at all. And a move like that, you got to really like calculate, okay, but what's the response going to be to that? What is the actual goal? How do we do this and when? I think that the thing that is a bitter pill to swallow for many people, I would include myself on this, who are immigration restrictionists and who think it is, it's profoundly criminal what our government has done to our own people with immigration policy. And obviously the Joe Biden administration is the clearest example of that, but it's way beyond that. I mean, it's been done really for 50 years. But it was done. And I think even Nick would acknowledge this, at least to some degree, that, you know, we talked about this a bit when he was on my show. It was like, you know, we can't go back in time. You can't go back to, and so if you're actually talking about, like, let's just say, what is the number of illegal people living in the country, Rob? You've read about it. What's your best guess on it? I think between 30 to 50 million.
I was going to say 40. So yeah.
Well, that is right between 30 to 50. You show me the plan of how you're going to go find 30 to 50 million people and deport all of them without turning our country into like a goddamn North Korea style hellhole, because that's a worse problem actually than having a bunch of illegal immigrants. So I'm open to proposals. And I would always err on the side of like the most humanitarian proposal you can come up with. I think people who are in the country illegally do not have a right to be here, and we have a right to remove them. But the devil's in the details with stuff like that. And I think it's easy to just say, and look, I mean, I like Nick, and I thought we had a really interesting conversation. I thought this conversation with Tucker was great. I do think that what he's kind of maybe growing out of a little bit, or just what it is at the next level after, it's easy to always have the most badass answer to every question. You know, that's easy. And that appeals particularly to young men, you know, just always the toughest, most badass thing. You know, what's the solution to immigration? Kick the goddamn doors in, arrest the governors, kick everybody out. Like that's, but I think the devil's really in the details in those plans. It's like, okay, but what's really the plan here? And what actually will be the response to this? And so my first fear would be that like Trump actually trying to do something like that might just set off the chain of events that just ruins Trump's presidency. And none of that even ends up happening. Like it gets struck down in the courts, the governor ends up winning, and Donald Trump is just totally neutered for the rest of his presidency. And so it's not, you know, like the thing that's the most satisfying for like that, like aggressive young man in you is not actually always the best strategy or policy. That I
think if you were a strong man on that level of arresting governors and rounding everybody up at that level, you're going to get so much pushback. You're going to end up not actually. I don't think that's the way of optimizing deportations or correcting what Biden did. Also, if you wanted to arrest and haul off the governor in Illinois, you're going to need like an F-150 or something.
Yeah, you might be right about that. It's going to cost a lot of taxpayer money, is what.
Maybe go for one of the smaller governors first and see what the reaction is.
Let's go with Shapiro first. You could fit that guy. You could fit that guy on just about any cast. With Duncan Trussell even said that he was shocked at the videos of families and workers. And he said something along the lines of, I thought they were going for the criminals. Yeah. Well, you know, this was a major thing that I was talking about after Trump won the election and right before. It's that it's the old thing. It's like the civil rights movement, man. Like there were, and in fact, if you know the story, right, it was like the Martin Luther King and his guys, they picked Birmingham, Alabama specifically because they knew they would get that reaction. Like the thing was, it was an asymmetrical warfare move. Like they were trying to get the reaction. And this is part of the reason why they all wore suits and they were all completely nonviolent, right? Because they weren't there to pick a fight with the cops. They were there to get on video what the cops would do to peaceful young black men in suits simply for practicing civil disobedience. And these images were caught on camera. They're famous images that you've probably still all seen today, the dogs and the fire hoses and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, there were tens of millions of Americans who supported segregation. But even the ones who supported segregation, it was real tough for them to look at that. You know, it's easy, and this is always the case with government policies, right? It's easy to support the policy in abstract sense, you know, like in the same sense, it's like, you know, I don't want Iran to get a nuke. Well, that's easy to say. We won't let Iran get a nuke. That's easy to say. Do you want to launch a war to stop them from getting a nuke? See, that's a little bit different. And government policy always relies on force. That's the law. The law is not a list of suggestions. It's a list of the shit you must do, or there will be consequences. And it's easy to say, I support mass deportations. It's a much different thing to like see a mother, you know, who's like a 55-year-old who's got 3 kids, who's getting hauled out of here, who's lived here her whole life. So I'm not surprised that that started like turning some people off, because it is, you know, and that's another calculation that I think, like in the point about Fuentes' comment, it's another calculation you have to make. I mean, what does that do? You know, even if you have like the polls I had seen earlier this year, there were polls where it was over 60% of people supported mass deportations. The most recent ones I looked at was down from that, but it was still north of 50%. It was still a majority support. But then you got to ask yourself, right? Let's say the mass deportations get real violent. What happens to that number? Probably goes down. You know, because it's not just hard. Once you've got over 50% support, it's not just hardcore right wingers. Now it's a coalition. It's by definition, it's centrists are in there too, right? And so you're very susceptible to losing a lot of those people. So all I'm saying is like, it's a complicated calculation, and I think it requires people who actually play 4D chess, not people who their fans pretend that they do, which is more the situation with Donald Trump. All right, let me see. We got some other questions here. Mower and me would be Crowder and Dave, basically. Wouldn't let him get a word in. Oh, I don't know. Was that me being on Crowder? If any of you guys saw it, let me know. Dave, are you disappointed in Crowder not including the console war to be one of the ones that Trump ended? Oh, yeah, he started, well, it was a weird point where he started going off about all the wars that Donald Trump has ended. And I was like, what wars has Donald Trump ended? And he's like,
Cambodia,
you know,
Vietnam.
Yeah, Azerbaijan and all these others,
Pakistan.
and India, Pakistan. And I was like, oh. I'm not saying like he made a phone call and then he takes credit for a war ending. I'm saying like, of the wars that Donald Trump was funding or fighting, which ones did he end? And then he goes, the Abraham Accords. And I was like, what wars did the Abraham Accords end? And like, I just kept asking. And then finally he goes, the Gaza ceasefire deal. I go, yeah, okay, we'll see. Like, we'll see. And then he goes, he ended the war in Iran. I go, he launched the war in Iran. You don't give someone credit for ending the war they launched. I mean, I guess you can, but you also got to add in that he started the whole thing. So yeah, I thought, you know, look, like I'm not trying to fight with Crowder. He was being nice to me by the end of it. You know, I've got some weird feelings about him for some other reasons. And you know, I didn't bring any of that stuff up on the show because it just didn't seem appropriate. But like, you know, I'm buddies with Dave Landau, and I don't like the way that whole thing went down. But yeah, I just, you know, I'm not even trying to be in a fight with him. I just thought that was like kind of a silly point. Dave, did you see the bounty put out on Pam Bondi? Why bother? She's useless. Yeah, I don't know. I saw someone tweet, but I haven't like looked into that at all. Don't really know enough about it to say. Okay, what do you got here? Did you think Crowder was going to start? Did you think Crowder was going to start with, you said impeach Trump? Trump's better than the Democrats. No, I didn't really expect that, but in hindsight, I guess, you know, it was kind of like the Josh Hammer thing. It's like it's funny because, and I think I made this point a bit on the show, but you know, I've made this point to you guys before, but right, like if you remember, right, Ben Shapiro never said my name for years. He never said my name. He did segments on me and never said my name. And what was the first time he said my name? It was after I called for Trump to be impeached, because that's when all these guys go, see, they know Trump is enormously popular amongst the base, and they know that their bullshit is not. Like that is just so obvious, you know, right now. Like the Israel first shit is not popular amongst the base of America Firsters, but Donald Trump still is very popular. So then they have me, and I'm carving through all these people in debates, and no one quite knows how to get. So then they saw that as their big moment. Like, oh, this is why Josh Hammer opened his second debate. I know I lost the first one, but the second one I'm going to open up with, this guy talks trash about Donald Trump. And so that it seemed to me like that was where Crowder was trying to go. He even said at one point, he goes, "Oh, so you side with Obama on Iran, not Donald Trump." And I said, this is such a cheap trick, man. Like it goes, you're saying, I go, dude, no one's a bigger critic of Obama than me. And Obama was horrible on foreign policy. But like, yes, was the JCPOA better than tearing up the JCPOA? Yes, it sure was. Was negotiating with Iran better than bombing them? Yes, it absolutely was. But I thought I was like, just with the Josh Hammer thing, I thought I was kind of able to deal with that pretty easily. Because I just went, no, I'm not borrowing the foreign policy of Barack Obama. I'm borrowing the foreign policy of Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan and George Washington. No one's more conservative than my foreign policy.
I hate that shit so much. I have a joke about it in my act, but it's just when you criticize Trump or you point out that he said two things that were contradictory and they go, "Oh, so would you prefer a Democrat?" And you're like, "No, that's not what I was saying.
Yeah,
I'm criticizing Trump to try and have a better Trump, or I'm trying to make sense out of what he's doing. That's my job. I do political commentary, and the guy has a dumb policy here. I'm not saying that I would have preferred Biden or Kamala Harris's policies. I'm criticizing what Trump did."
And, you know, it's a weird thing because I heard, you know, you hear, I mean, I guess just when you get to a certain level, you get a lot of feedback from all different, you know, areas. But, you know, I hear there were people who were like, Dave, you know, I sold out when I supported Donald Trump. Other people were thrilled that I supported Donald Trump. Then there were people who said, if you remember, there were people saying, now that Dave supported Donald Trump, he's going to have to justify everything he does. He's going to defend him if he, you know, bombs Iran. And then when you criticize him, then they all go, "You voted for this, so blah, blah, blah." And then the other side goes, "Would you like Kamala better?" And it's all just too stupid. You know, like all of this is, look, what's the point of us doing what we do if I'm not going to criticize Donald Trump when he messes up? If you're just going to always say, well, the other side's worse, so you have to support him, then okay, then we shouldn't do a show. Just hang a Trump sign up and that's it, right? Doesn't make any sense. Too leaky, that one, Rob. Why do they get leaky sometimes? What is that? All right, let me see what, let's get to a couple more questions here before we wrap up. This dude flicking his Zens. Well, no, but I do it because, Rob, you told me you flick them, right?
Yes. Well, all right. I will explain.
I don't like when they're leaky. I hate leaky. That taste.
Sometimes something breaks, like a different pouch breaks, and you end up with the chemicals that are on the inside on the outside of the pouch, which is what makes them too harsh. And so I'm teaching the kids about proper Zin usage. If you take the Zin and you give it 2 flicks on the outside like it's a heroin needle, firstly, it's a nice little ritual. Not that I do it all the time, but it tends to get off all the dust that might have otherwise been in the container. Now you got a fresh Zin on your hands. So, you know, fan, watch yourself if you're going to try and criticize proper Zin usage.
By the way, it didn't work. I flicked it. It was still whatever, leaky, and I didn't like it. But I'll be flicking another one soon. Okay. All right. Here we got another question here. Dave, assuming neither Eric or Don Jr. run, how much influence do you think Trump will have, and how much do you think Vance would deviate from Trump's policies if he runs? Well, it's a really good question. And I mean, the answer is essentially, I don't know. I don't think any of us know. I really don't have a great feeling. You know, I get the sense that JD Vance has views that are in a direction, but I've never really gotten the impression that he has the conviction that he will stand by those views, even if that costs him something politically. And forget even like, because you asked the question, which is actually a good way to ask it. You said, how much will he deviate from Trump's policies if he runs? Which is a different question than if he wins, right? And so I think the interesting dynamic here is this, and this is always an interesting dynamic in politics. This is one of the things that really hurt Kamala Harris, is that when you're the vice president running for president, you are a candidate for president, but you're also still serving the current president. And so you're in a little bit of a pickle, right? Like, and this was Kamala Harris, I mean, because she's really, really stupid and really, really, really bad at politics. I think what might be the biggest self-inflicted wound of her brief campaign, Rob, as you remember well,
On The
was
View.
when she The View. That's right. You remember exactly what I'm saying. She went on The View and they said, what would you have done different than Joe Biden? And she said, nothing comes to mind. And the fact that she wasn't prepared enough to know that that would be a really bad question. Like, you've got a really unpopular president here. Like, inflation's through the roof, the border's wide open, the war in Ukraine is being lost, and groceries are up, 30%. You can't say nothing. You gotta, but she's in this tough position where she still wanted to say, look what an amazing, it's tough to be the vice president because you want to say, look what a great job we've done. Let's keep this going. But you also don't want to be attached to any of the negative shit. But now, think about how much tougher a situation JD Vance is going to be in, where he is going to be campaigning, but the president of the United States of America is still, listen, for those of you guys who love him or hate him, he is the pettiest human being in the history of the world. There has just never been anyone pettier than Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he's the guy who Marco Rubio once, when they were running against each other, made a crack at a stump speech about Donald Trump having little hands. And Donald Trump opened the next debate in front of like 100 million people and goes, he said, I had little hands. Look at these things. Nothing wrong with these hands. Big old hands, right? Like, that's Donald Trump. You cannot insult him at all, or it's a declaration of war. And so that's a real interesting dynamic. How the hell does JD Vance run and ever have anything where he can criticize Donald Trump on? And I'm not sure how you walk that tightrope, but I think that's a real tough tightrope.
It's going to come down to how some of Trump's policies play out and how favorable of a position Trump is in. If there's Trump fever, that he's doing such a good job that people would like a third round of Donald Trump, you will have JD Vance saying, I'm the legacy of America first and Donald Trump, and he will be 100% on the path. And then when he's actually president, he'll do a little bit more of what he actually would like to be doing. If Donald Trump is not polling that well and he's got to beat some other people out, he'll just be tactful and say Donald Trump's the most brilliant person ever, and he's an incredible deal maker, and he did fantastic things, and I stand by all of the work that he did. And when I have the opportunity to be in these same spots, here's what I'll do differently. And that's it. He'll give you the pitch for what he thinks he can do a little bit better and be nothing but praiseworthy for Donald Trump. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is Donald Trump is a force and a single individual, and he's able to win games with a skill set that I don't have. And so here's the policy that I would enact because I don't quite have Donald Trump's tactfulness in negotiations. And so I would have to approach it this way because I don't have what he has.
Yeah, he's gonna have to find all types of answers like that still kind of kiss Donald Trump's ass. But I'll tell you, even that, the issue with that is that does come off like you're a bitch. And it's tough to be the top alpha when you still gotta be like, I can't actually upset this guy. Look, again, it'll be interesting. I mean, one of the things that I was arguing with Crowder about today was that he was basically taking this line against me that, hey, if well, you were saying you wanted Trump impeached, that would leave us with Kamala Harris or something like that. And I did make the point. I go, well, no, that would leave us with JD Vance. Actually, it wouldn't put the Democrats in power. But I was like, and I said at one point, I go, all right, so Stephen, 4 months ago, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, said Obama committed treason and we have the proof. And she sent it over to the Justice Department. I go, do you believe Obama's going to be tried for treason and convicted? Does anyone believe that? Does anybody actually believe that we're going to get the truth on Epstein or the truth on Russiagate, or anybody's going to be held responsible for all of the crimes that they've committed? Okay, so since we're all together that none of that's going to happen, the promise of this administration was to drain the swamp. And we all know they're not draining the swamp right now. And it seems like they're going to hand it up to what will probably be close to a 50-50 shot, whether we get a Democrat back in there or not. We're supposed to stay quiet while all that's happening? We're supposed to not be criticizing this administration? No, it's not because of me that the Democrats might win in 2028 is because Donald Trump is backing the Israelis and launching wars on their behalf and covering up the Epstein thing and continuing to spend us off a cliff and continuing, like that's the issue. That's what's going to make it. If Donald Trump actually fixed all those things, JD Vance would be a shoo-in in 2028. So no, I look at things a little bit differently. I don't think my job is to sit here and, I don't think my job is to sit here and praise a politician. And I don't think my job is to sit here and think about 4D chess for that matter. Think about what's the thing I could say that would be the best strategy for this. Like, as I've always said for many years, someone's got to just tell the truth. That's got to be someone's role. Other people can be the political operatives. That's not what me and you do, Rob. We just talk to our audience and we tell them the way we think it is. That's what we've been doing. That's why we've grown, because we've been, and we've got a really good track record on getting it right on the big issues. So that's what we're going to continue doing. Someone has to, Anyway, go see Robbie on the road.